The silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It pressed against your eardrums, suffocating the air out of the room. 1 second, the restaurant was filled with the hum of New York's elite clinking crystal glasses. The next, a silver fork hit the floor, and you could hear a pin drop 3 tables away. Why? Because the shy girl, the one nobody ever noticed, the one who trembled when she poured water, had just opened her mouth. She didn't apologize. She didn't stutter. She looked the most dangerous man on the East Coast in the eye and spoke the one dialect that hasn't been heard in New York since the blood feuds. And just like that, the waitress was gone, and something else was standing in her place. The restaurant Leon's sat on the corner of West 4th and Perry like a fortress of old money. It was the kind of place where the lighting was always dim. The velvet banquettes were a deep blood red, and the menu didn't have prices because if you had to ask, you were in the wrong zip code. Elara Voss adjusted her apron in the server's station, her hands shaking just slightly. She hated busy nights. Busy nights meant the heavy hitters came out. Busy nights meant the air conditioning was cranked up to freezing to keep the men in Italian wool suits comfortable, while the girls in the thin black dresses shivered. "Table 4 needs water, Elara. Move it," hissed Thorne, the floor manager. Thorne was a man who sweated grease and anxiety in equal measure. He snapped his fingers at her, a sound that made Elara flinch. "Yes, Thorne." "Going," she whispered, grabbing the silver pitcher. Elara was young, but she looked even younger. She had dark hair she kept pulled back in a severe, tight bun that hurt her scalp. And she wore glasses she didn't really need, just to create a barrier between her eyes and the customers. She wanted to be invisible. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility kept her hidden from the past she had spent years running from. She moved through the dining room like a ghost. She had perfected the art of sliding a breadbasket onto a table without breaking the conversation of the diners. She poured water without splashing a drop. She was a piece of furniture, distinct only in her terrified desire to not be perceived. Tonight, the tension in the kitchen was different. The head chef, a volatile Frenchman named Pierre, wasn't screaming. He was pacing. The sous chefs were scrubbing surfaces that were already clean. "What's going on?" Elara asked Lila, the bartender, as she refilled her pitcher. Lila leaned in, her eyes wide. "The Vales just booked the private alcove. Walk in, out." Elara's blood ran cold. The pitcher rattled against the marble counter. "The Vales!" You didn't need to be in the life to know who they were. In this city, the Vale family was royalty, but the kind of royalty that ruled with fear rather than decrees. Magnus Vale was the patriarch, the capo. He was a relic of the old world, a man who had survived wars with the 5 families and the crackdowns. And then there was his son, Ronan. Elara had seen Ronan Vale in the newspapers, usually in the background of a charity gala photo, looking like a panther forced to wear a tuxedo. He was the heir. The rumor on the street, the real street, was that Ronan was trying to legitimize the family business, moving them into construction and shipping, trying to wash the blood off the money. But you can't wash blood out of silk. It stains forever. "I can't take that table," Elara whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Thorne knows I get nervous with the VIPs. "You don't have a choice, honey," Lila said, grimacing. "Sarah called out sick, and Jessica is stuck with the senator's party. You're on the alcove." Elara felt the walls closing in. If she went to that table, if they looked at her, really looked at her, would they see it? Would they see the resemblance? She had dyed her hair, changed her name, changed her walk, but fear has a way of stripping away disguises. "Elara!" Thorne's voice cracked like a whip. "They're here. Line up!" She hurried to the front, standing in the line of servers by the hostess stand. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop degrees. 4 men walked in. 2 were clearly security, walls of muscle in ill-fitting suits, their eyes scanning the room for threats. Then came Ronan. He was taller than he looked in the photos. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Elara made in a year. He didn't walk. He stalked. He had a face that was devastatingly handsome, but hard, like it had been chiseled from granite and left out in the rain. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely devoid of warmth. And behind him, leaning on a cane with a silver wolf's head handle, was Magnus. The old man was small, shrunken by age, but he radiated a terrifying power. He wore a fedora he didn't bother to remove. His face was a roadmap of violence, deep lines etched around a mouth that looked like it hadn't smiled for a long time. Thorn bowed so low Elara thought he might tip over. "Don Magnus, Mr. Vale, an honor. Please, right this way." They moved past the line of servers. Ronan didn't look at any of them, but Magnus. The old man stopped. He paused right in front of Elara. He sniffed the air like an animal catching a scent on the wind. He turned his head slowly, his cloudy eyes fixing on her. Elara stopped breathing. She stared at the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "New girl," Magnus rasped. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together. Yes, sir," Thorn stammered, stepping in. "Elara, she's very quiet, very efficient." Magnus grunted, losing interest. He tapped his cane on the floor and kept walking. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, her knees trembling so hard she had to grab the hostess stand for support. "Get it together," Thorn hissed in her ear. "You have the wine service. Don't mess this up, or you're fired before the appetizer hits the table." The private alcove was a semicircular booth at the back of the restaurant, separated from the main floor by heavy velvet curtains. It was intimate, dark, and acoustically designed so that conversations held there stayed there. Elara stood outside the curtain, clutching a bottle of premium red wine. It was an expensive bottle of wine. Her hands were sweating. "Just open the wine, pour it, leave." "You are a ghost," she told herself. She slipped through the curtain. The 4 men were seated. The 2 bodyguards sat on the ends, scanning the perimeter. Ronan sat on the right, checking something on his phone. Magnus sat in the center, looking miserable. "This place?" Magnus was grumbling, waving a hand at the room. "It smells like perfume and desperation. Why we come here, Ronan? Why not Luigi's on Arthur Avenue?" "Because Luigi's is being watched by the feds, Papa," Ronan said without looking up from his phone. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and controlled. "And because we are celebrating the union deal, we celebrate in the light. Remember light?" Magnus scoffed. "We sit in the dark. We eat fancy food that tastes like nothing. This is not respect." Elara approached the table. She felt Ronan's eyes flick to her, assessing her as a potential threat, then dismissing her as harmless. Began the ritual. She cut the foil. She began the ritual. She cut the foil. She uncorked the bottle. The pop was soft, professional. She poured a small amount into Ronan's glass for him to taste. Ronan swirled it, sniffed it, took a sip. "It's fine. Pour." She moved to Magnus. The old man was staring at his bread plate with disdain. He picked up a breadstick and snapped it in half aggressively. "Papa, drink the wine," Ronan said, a hint of exhaustion in his tone. "I don't want this vinegar," Magnus muttered. "I want to go home. My legs hurt. The air in here is too dry." Elara poured the wine into Magnus's glass. Her hand shook just a fraction. A tiny, singular drop of red wine missed the glass and landed on the pristine white tablecloth. It was microscopic, a red dot no bigger than a pinhead, but in the silence of the alcove. I'm so sorry, sir. I will change the... I'm so sorry, sir. I will change the cloth immediately." "Sorry." Magnus slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery jumped. "Sorry doesn't clean the stain. This is the problem with this country now. No pride. You serve Magnus Vale and you shake like a leaf. What is wrong with you?" Ronan sighed, putting his phone down. Papa, let it go. It's a drop. It's not the drop, Ronan. It's the weakness. Magnus turned his fury on Elara. Look at her, scared of her own shadow. Hey, girl, you know who I am. Yes, yes, sir, Elara whispered, clutching the bottle to her chest. Then why you act like a frightened rabbit? Be professional. He grabbed his cane. Get me the manager. I want a waiter who has blood in their veins, not water. She froze. If Thorne came over, he would fire her. If she lost this job, she couldn't pay for her grandmother's nursing home. She would be out on the street. And if she was on the street, they would find her. The people she ran from. She couldn't let Thorne come over. She couldn't leave. Magnus was ranting now, slipping out of English. He wasn't speaking Italian. He was speaking Sicilian, but not the standard Sicilian you hear in the movies. He was speaking the deep, guttural dialect of the interior, Castella. It was a language of shepherds and bandits, old and impenetrable to outsiders. Magnus grumbled to Ronan, "These idiots don't even know how to hold a bottle. They look like they swallowed a broom." Ronan rubbed his temples. He evidently understood, but he looked annoyed by the outburst. Elara stood there. The fear was still pounding in her chest, but something else rose up to meet it. Indignation, pride, an instinct. She knew that dialect. It was the language of her kitchen growing up. It was the language of the lullabies her father sang before he was murdered. It was the code she had promised to forget. But looking at this old man acting like a king in exile, disrespecting her work, the filter in her brain snapped. Elara didn't move to get the manager. Instead, she straightened her spine. She took a step closer to the table. She set the bottle down with a firm thud. The sound made Magnus stop mid-sentence. He looked up, confused. Elara looked him dead in the eye. The shyness evaporated, replaced by a cold, steely gaze that mirrored his own. She opened her mouth. "Your Honor gets angry over a crumb of bread when the table is full," she said. Her voice was low, resonant, and the accent was flawless. It was thick, ancient, and perfectly native to the hills of Castellamare. Translation: Your Honor gets angry over a crumb of bread when the table is full. Silence. Absolute, frozen silence. The two bodyguards reached inside their jackets. Ronan's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. He stared at Elara, his mouth slightly open, the boredom completely gone from his face. But it was Magnus's reaction that stopped the world. The old man's face went slack. The anger drained away, replaced by shock. He stared at the waitress in the cheap apron as if he had just seen a ghost rise from the grave. Elara didn't stop. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, using a phrase that was specific to the Vale clan's home region, a phrase used to check an elder who was losing his dignity. The old wolf loses his fur, but not his vice. Translation: The old wolf loses his fur, but not his vice. But tonight, Don Magnus, you just look old. Leave the girl alone and drink the wine. No one breathed. Elara realized what she had done. The adrenaline crashed, the red fog lifted, and she saw 4 dangerous men staring at her. She saw Ronan Vale looking at her not as a waitress, but as a puzzle he needed to solve immediately. She grabbed the wine bottle, her hands trembling violently again. I'll get the check," she squeaked in English, her voice cracking. She turned on her heel and bolted through the curtain. "Wait!" Ronan's voice roared behind her. Elara didn't wait. She ran. She ran past the hostess stand, past Thorne, and straight out the back door into the alleyway. The cold New York air hit her burning face. She had just insulted the Don of the Vale crime family, and worse, she had let them know she spoke the language of the enemy. The alley behind Leon's smelled of wet cardboard, stale grease, and impending doom. Elara's sneakers slapped against the wet pavement. She made it feet toward the street, toward freedom, when the heavy steel door behind her banged open again. "Voss, you get back here." It was Thorne, of course. It was Thorne. Elara skidded to a halt near a dumpster, chest heaving. Thorn, stepping out into the grim alleyway like a dark prince descending into the underworld, was Ronan Vale. He didn't look out of breath. He didn't look angry. He looked focused. He lit a cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating the sharp angles of his cheekbones, casting deep shadows over his eyes. Thorn marched up to Elara, grabbing her arm roughly. "Are you insane? You little idiot? Do you have any idea who that was? You just insulted Magnus Vale. You're fired. Get your bag and get out. I don't want to see your face in this zip code again." Elara flinched, pulling her arm away, tears pricking her eyes. I know. I'm sorry. I'm leaving." "You're not leaving." A deep voice cut through the air. Thorn froze. Elara froze. Ronan walked forward, the smoke from his cigarette curling into the night air. He stopped feet from Elara. He was terrifyingly tall up close. He smelled of sandalwood, tobacco, and cold rain. "Mr. Vale," Thorn stammered, his sweat production doubling instantly. "I apologize profusely. She's a temp, unstable. I've already terminated her. She won't bother you or your father again." "Shut up, Thorn," Ronan said softly. He didn't even look at the manager. His eyes were locked on Elara's face, dissecting her. "Yes, sir. Shutting up." Thorn took a step back, fading into the brickwork. Ronan took a drag of his cigarette and exhaled slowly, the smoke drifting past Elara's face. "Costella," he said. It wasn't a question. Elara swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me, Elara, or whatever your real name is." Ronan stepped closer, invading her personal space. "That wasn't just Italian. That wasn't just Sicilian. That was a dialect from the mountains, specifically the dialect of the Vale stronghold. Nobody in New York speaks that. Not the young ones, just the old-timers. And you?" He looked her up and down. "You are not an old-timer." "I picked it up," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a prisoner trying to break bars. "My grandfather, he was from the region." "What was his name?" "Rossi," she lied. "It was a common name. Safe." "Rossi," Ronan repeated, his voice flat. He didn't believe her. And the phrase, "the old wolf loses his fur, but not his vice." "My grandmother used to say that to my father when he was being stubborn. I haven't heard anyone say that to him without getting a bullet in the knee." Elara looked down at her shoes. "I lost my temper. It was unprofessional. I'm sorry." "Unprofessional?" Ronan let out a short, sharp laugh. It was suicidal. But here's the strange thing. "Miss Voss, my father isn't angry." Elara looked up, blinking. "He's not." "No, he's laughing. He's asking for you." Ronan flicked his cigarette away. It sparked on the wet asphalt. "He says finally someone treated him like a man, not a museum exhibit. He wants you back at the table." "No," Elara said, stepping back. "I can't. I'm fired. Thorn said—" "I don't care what Thorn said. I own the building. Thorn rents. If I tell him to make you general manager, he will shine your shoes every morning." Ronan's expression hardened. "My father has been depressed. He refuses to eat. He refuses to go out. He hates his nurses. He hates his guards. Tonight, for the first time, he looks alive. Because of you." He reached into his jacket pocket. Elara flinched, expecting a gun. Ronan pulled out a business card. Black, heavy cardstock, gold lettering. "I am offering you a job, not as a waitress." "I don't want a job," Elara said, her voice trembling. "I just want to go home." "I know you need money," Ronan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "I saw your file in the office while you were running away. You work double shifts. You send checks to a nursing home in Queens, Green Meadow Care Facility. Your grandmother?" Elara went cold. "Leave her out of this." "Private care is expensive. Waitress tips are volatile." Ronan stepped in, trapping her against the dumpster. I am offering you a position as my father's personal companion. You ensure he eats. You talk to him in that dialect he loves so much. You keep his spirits up. In exchange, I pay you a lot, cash, and I cover your grandmother's medical bills in full." Elara's mouth fell open. That would change everything. It would mean she could stop looking over her shoulder for debt collectors. But it meant walking into the lion's den. "And if I say no?" she asked weakly. Ronan leaned down, his face inches from hers. His eyes were dark pools of secrets. "You seem like a girl who is hiding from something, Elara. People who hide usually don't want powerful men digging into their past. If you walk away, I get curious. I start making calls. I find out who Elara Voss really is." He pulled back, his face returning to a mask of cool indifference. "But if you work for me, you're under my protection. No one touches Vale property." The rain started to fall harder, plastering Elara's hair to her forehead. She looked at the card in his hand. It was a trap. She knew it was a trap, but it was a trap with gold bars, and the world outside was full of wolves. "When do I start?" she whispered. Ronan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just secured his meal. "A car will pick you up. Don't be late. The wolf hates to wait." The Vale estate wasn't a house. It was a compound located on the north shore of Long Island. It sat behind tall iron gates topped with spikes. The driveway was long, winding through manicured forests that felt less like nature and more like a perimeter buffer. Elara sat in the back of a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver, a silent giant named Garrick, who had a scar running through his eyebrow, hadn't said a word since picking her up from her tiny, crumbling apartment in Bushwick. As the house came into view, a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had been airlifted from the Italian countryside, Elara felt a wave of nausea. She was walking voluntarily into the headquarters of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. "Just play the part," she told herself. "You are Elara Voss. You are a nobody. You are just here to pour coffee and speak Sicilian." The car stopped. Garrick opened the door. "Inside, second floor, library." Elara walked up the massive stone steps. The front door was opened by a maid in a gray uniform who looked tired. She led Elara through a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-looking men in suits. They reached the library. The maid knocked and scurried away. "Enter!" Magnus's voice boomed from inside. Elara pushed the heavy oak doors open. The library was magnificent. 2 stories of books, a rolling ladder, and a massive fireplace where a fire roared despite the mild weather. Magnus was sitting in a leather armchair, a blanket over his knees. But unlike the night before, he looked alert. His eyes were sharp. Standing by the window, looking out at the grounds, was Ronan. He wore a navy suit today, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He turned as she entered. "You came?" Ronan said, sounding mildly surprised. "I need the money," Elara said, keeping her voice steady. She looked at Magnus. "Good morning, Don Magnus." Magnus slapped the arm of his chair. "Ah, the girl. Come here, come here." Elara approached him. "How are you feeling today, sir?" "Better now." Magnus grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "These idiots," he gestured to Ronan. "They give me American coffee, water, dirty water. You know how to make coffee?" "I know how to make cafe," Elara corrected. "Go." Magnus pointed to a side table where an expensive espresso machine sat unused. "Make it correctly. Short, strong, like a punch in the face." Elara went to the machine. She felt Ronan's eyes on her back, burning. She worked in silence. The grind, the tamp, the pull, the smell of rich, dark coffee filled the room. She poured it into a tiny ceramic cup and brought it to the old man. "No sugar." Magnus took a sip. He closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. Madonna Mia. Finally. He looked at Ronan. You see, it takes a woman from the hills to do a simple thing. Ronan walked over, hands in his pockets. I'm glad you're happy, Papa. Elara is going to stay with you during the days. She will read to you, walk with you in the garden, and ensure you eat. I don't need a babysitter, Magnus grumbled. But he didn't look at Elara with hate. He looked at her with curiosity. So tell me, where are your people from? Which village? Elara froze. This was the test. Near Scapello, Don Magnus. Farmers, nobody important. Magnus narrowed his eyes. Scapello, beautiful water, bad soil. My mother was from near there. He leaned forward. You have the look. The eyes dark like olives, but you hide behind those glasses. He reached out, his hand surprisingly fast, and snatched the glasses off her face. Hey! Elara stepped back, instinctively raising a hand to her face. Without the thick frames, her face was exposed. Her cheekbones were high, her eyes large and expressive. Magnus stared at her. For a second, a flicker of recognition passed through his cloudy eyes. You remind me of someone, he murmured. A ghost from a long time ago. Ronan stepped in, taking the glasses from his father's hand. Papa, give her the glasses. She needs to see. He handed them back to Elara. His fingers brushed hers. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up her arm that she wasn't expecting. He felt it too. She saw his pupils dilate slightly. Get to work, Ronan said abruptly, stepping away. I have a meeting with the capos. I'll be back in the evening. Elara, if he acts up, call Garrick. And if I act up, Magnus cackled. Then God help her, Ronan said. He walked to the door but paused before leaving. He looked back at Elara. And Elara, don't wander the house. Stick to the library, the kitchen, and the garden. There are doors in this house that stay locked for a reason. With that, he left. The hours were unexpected. Elara expected a monster. She found a lonely, bored old man who just wanted to be heard. They spoke in the dialect for hours. Magnus told her stories about his youth in Sicily, about the lemon groves, the donkeys, the poverty. He didn't talk about the murders, the drugs, or the empire he built on blood. He talked about the sun. Elara found herself relaxing. She read him the Italian newspaper. She walked with him in the garden, holding his arm as he shuffled along the gravel paths. You have strong hands, Magnus said as they sat on a stone bench near a fountain. Not waitress hands. These are hands that have worked or fought. I've had to work hard my whole life, Elara said. Good. Hard work cleans the soul. Magnus looked at her. My son Ronan, he works hard, but his soul is heavy. He carries the weight of the sins of the father. You understand? I understand carrying weight you didn't ask for, Elara said a little too honestly. Magnus nodded. He needs a wife, a real woman, not these plastic models he brings to the galas. They break too easy. He needs steel. He looked at Elara sideways. You have steel. Elara laughed nervously. I'm just the help, Don Magnus. We'll see, the old man muttered. As the sun began to set, the atmosphere in the house changed. The staff became tense. Security doubled at the gates. Ronan returned. He looked exhausted. His suit jacket was over his arm, his tie was gone, and there was a bruise forming on his knuckles. He found Elara in the kitchen, washing Magnus's espresso cup. How was he? Ronan asked, leaning against the doorframe. He was fine, Elara said, drying her hands. He ate pasta for lunch. He walked. He's sleeping now. Ronan looked impressed. He hasn't walked in the garden. He walked over to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. You're good at this. Better than the nurses with the degrees. I treat him like a person, not a patient, Elara said. Maybe. Ronan took a long drink of water. He watched her over the rim of the bottle. I did some checking today on Elara Voss. Elara's heart stopped. She gripped the dish towel. And everything seems in order. High school in Ohio. Community college. Waitressing gigs. Ronan set the bottle down. On paper, you are incredibly boring, Elara. I told you I'm a nobody. But paper can be bought, Ronan said, and there are gaps. There are years between high school and college where you have no tax records, no address, just nothing. I was traveling, Elara said quickly, backpacking, paying cash. For years, Ronan raised an eyebrow. Where? Europe, Asia. Did you go to Italy? Briefly. And that's where you perfected a dialect that hasn't been spoken widely. I have a good ear for languages, Elara said, edging toward the door. Is that a crime? In my world, Ronan said, his voice low, skills usually imply training, and training implies a master. He blocked her path. He wasn't threatening her exactly, but the intensity of his presence was overwhelming. He was studying her features, looking for a crack in the mask. Who are you really, Elara? He whispered. Before she could answer, before she could construct another lie, the front door of the house slammed open. Voices shouted in the foyer, Ronan, we have a problem! It was Garrick. Ronan's face snapped from interrogation to war mode instantly. He turned and strode into the foyer. Elara followed, staying in the shadows. 3 men were dragging a 4th man into the house. The 4th man was beaten, bloody, and zip-tied. We caught him near the perimeter fence, Garrick said, breathing hard, taking photos of the security layout. Ronan walked up to the prisoner. He grabbed the man by the hair and yanked his head up. Who sent you? Ronan growled. The man spat blood on the marble floor. Go to hell, Vale. Ronan didn't blink. He punched the man in the gut, hard. The man doubled over, wheezing. Check his pockets, Ronan ordered. Garrick rummaged through the man's jacket and pulled out a wallet and a phone. He tossed the wallet to Ronan. Ronan flipped it open. He froze. A Russo, Ronan said, his voice turning ice. We have a rat from the Russo family on the grounds. At the sound of the name, Russo, Elara let out a gasp. She couldn't help it. It was a visceral, involuntary reaction. Her hand flew to her mouth. The sound echoed in the large foyer. Ronan turned slowly. He looked at the prisoner. Then he looked at Elara. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not the terror of a waitress seeing violence, but the terror of recognition. He looked back at the wallet, then at Elara. You know him, Ronan said. It wasn't a question. Elara backed away, shaking her head. No, I don't. You reacted. Ronan walked toward her, the blood on his knuckles stark against his skin. You heard Russo and you looked like you saw a ghost. Why? I didn't. I'm just scared, Elara cried. Liar! Ronan grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. The Russos are our sworn enemies. They killed my uncle. They tried to kill my father, and now I find a spy on my lawn, and my new waitress is hyperventilating at the mention of their name. He pulled her closer, his eyes blazing with fury. Who are you? He roared. Are you one of them? Elara's heart hammered so hard she thought she might pass out. Dragged her toward the library. Dragged her toward the library. Lock the prisoner in the cellar. I'll deal with him later. Right now, I'm going to have a long conversation with Miss Voss. He shoved Elara into the library and slammed the doors, locking them. Sit, he commanded. Elara sat. Ronan paced the room, running a hand through his hair. I should kill you just to be safe. That's what my father would do. He stopped and looked at her. But I'm not my father yet. He leaned over the desk. You have one chance. One. Tell me something only a Russo would know, or tell me why you hate them. Convince me. Elara looked at him. She saw the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to trust her. The chemistry between them was undeniable, fighting through the suspicion. She took a deep breath. She had to give him a crumb of truth to hide the loaf of lies. I don't work for them, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I hate them because because a man named Victor Russo killed my fiancé. It was a lie. Victor Russo was her brother. But Ronan didn't know that. Ronan stared at her. The anger in his face softened, replaced by confusion and a flicker of sympathy. "Victor Russo is dead," Ronan said. "He died in a car fire in Naples." "I know," Elara lied. "I lit the match." The lie hung in the air of the library, heavy and suffocating. "I lit the match." Ronan stared at Elara for a long time. The violence in his eyes receded, replaced by a dark, simmering curiosity. He didn't let go of her wrist, but his grip loosened, his thumb grazing the pulse point where her heart was frantically beating. "You killed a Russo," Ronan repeated slowly, testing the weight of the words. "If that is true, you are the only person in this room who has successfully taken one of them off the board permanently." He released her. Elara stumbled back against the desk, rubbing her wrist. She felt sick. She had just claimed credit for the death of her own brother, a brother who she knew wasn't actually dead. Victor Russo. She had to be careful not to slip and use his nickname, was very much alive, and he was the reason she had fled into the night. "I don't want a medal," Elara whispered, adjusting her glasses, which were askew. "I just want you to understand why I panicked. I can't be near a Russo. If they find me, if they find you, they will kill you," Ronan finished. He walked over to the fireplace and stared into the flames. "And now, because you are in my house, looking after my father, your safety is my problem." He turned back to her. The look on his face was no longer that of an employer. It was the look of a man claiming territory. "You aren't leaving this estate, Elara, not until I say so. You sleep here, you eat here. If you need a toothbrush, I'll buy you a diamond-encrusted one, but you do not cross that gate." "So I'm a prisoner." "You're a guest under high security," Ronan corrected. "There is a difference. Prisoners don't get the credit card." For the weeks, the Vale estate became Elara's entire world, and terrifyingly, it began to feel like home. She spent her mornings with Magnus. The old man was thriving. He had gained weight, the color returning to his cheeks. They would sit in the sunroom and Elara would read to him from the Odyssey, translating the Greek into the thick Sicilian dialect on the fly. Magnus loved it. He called her the Muse. But the evenings belonged to Ronan. He would come home late, smelling of the city and danger. He would find her in the library or the kitchen, and they would talk. At first, it was guarded. He tried to trip her up on her backstory. She dodged his questions with practiced ease, but slowly the interrogation turned into conversation. They argued about politics, they argued about wine, they argued about whether The Godfather was an insult or a masterpiece. Ronan hated it. Elara secretly loved it. One rainy day, Ronan came home with a bloody bandage wrapped around his hand. He refused to let the staff doctor look at it. "Let me see it," Elara said, finding him trying to pour brandy with his left hand in the study. "It's fine," Ronan grunted. "It's bleeding on the carpet. Magnus will have a fit." Elara walked over, grabbed the brandy bottle, poured him a glass, and then took his injured hand. She unwrapped the gauze. It was a nasty cut, deep across the knuckles. "Knife?" she asked, dipping a cloth in warm water. "Glass," he said, watching her face. "A disagreement at a club in Tribeca." "You should see the other guy," Elara teased gently, cleaning the wound. Ronan didn't smile. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "There is no other guy, not anymore." Elara paused. She looked up, and their faces were inches apart. The air in the room changed, charged with the same electricity that had sparked the first day. But now there was something else. A shared understanding of violence, a recognition of scars. Ronan reached out with his good hand and touched her cheek. His fingers were rough, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "You don't flinch," he whispered. "Most women flinch when they see the blood. You just clean it up." "I told you," Elara said, her voice trembling. "I'm not most women." "No," Ronan murmured, leaning in. "You're a liar, Elara Voss. But I think you might be my favorite lie." He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was a claiming. It was hungry and desperate, tasting of brandy and copper. Elara made a small noise in her throat and melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair. For a moment, she forgot her name. She forgot the Russos. She forgot that she was sleeping in the bed of the enemy. She was just a woman, and he was just a man who made her feel safe for the first time. But safety is an illusion when you build your house on a fault line. The next morning, the bubble burst. Elara was having breakfast with Magnus when Ronan walked in. He was wearing a formal black suit, and his face was grim. "Papa, Elara." He nodded to them. "We have a situation." Magnus put down his espresso. "What is it?" "The Russos have called for a summit," Ronan said. "At the Plaza Hotel, they claim they want to discuss a ceasefire regarding the ports." Elara dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "A ceasefire?" Magnus scoffed. "They want to assess our weakness. They want to see if the old wolf is really dying." "Exactly," Ronan said. "That is why you are coming, Papa. You need to show them you are strong." "I will go," Magnus said, his eyes gleaming. "I will wear my best suit." And Ronan turned to Elara, his eyes locking onto hers. "Elara is coming too." "What?" Elara stood up, panic seizing her chest. No, Ronan, I can't." "You have to," Ronan said, his voice hard. "You are the one who killed a Russo. You are the symbol of my protection. I am introducing you as my fiancé." "Fiancé!" Elara shrieked. "It's a cover," Ronan said calmly. "It explains why you live here. It explains why you are close to my father. And it sends a message to the Russos. The Vales are expanding. We are building a future." "Ronan, please," Elara begged, walking around the table. "You don't understand. I cannot be in a room with them. They will recognize me." "They won't," Ronan said, grabbing her shoulders. "You have the hair, the glasses, the dress, and you have me. I won't let anyone touch you. If you stay here alone, you are vulnerable. At the plaza, you are surrounded by my men." He smoothed her hair back. "Trust me, Elara. Just for one night, play the part. Be the steel my father says you are." Elara looked into his eyes. Meeting. She was trapped. "Okay," she meeting. She was trapped. "Okay," she whispered, sealing her fate. "I'll do it." The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and suppressed violence. The 5 families of New York were all present, an uneasy truce holding the room together like cheap glue. Elara wore a dress Ronan had selected. It was emerald green silk, backless, clinging to her like a second skin. Her hair was down, styled in loose waves that framed her face, minus the glasses. She felt naked without them. She held Ronan's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. "Breathe," Ronan whispered in her ear. "You look magnificent. Everyone is looking at you." "That's the problem," she hissed. Magnus walked on Ronan's other side, using his cane, but standing tall. He greeted the other dons with a curt nod, his reputation clearing a path through the crowd. "Don Vale!" a voice boomed. "And the little prince!" The crowd parted. Standing near the champagne tower was the Russo delegation. At the front was Don Dmitri Russo, Elara's father. He looked older than she remembered. His hair was white, his face heavier, but his eyes, cold, blue, shark-like, were exactly the same. Beside him stood a younger man, tall, lean, with a scar running down his cheek, Victor Russo, her brother. The one Ronan thought was dead, the one she said she killed. Elara stopped walking. The room spun. "Are always premature, Vale. I just needed our always premature Vale. I just needed a vacation in the Alps. Plastic surgery works wonders for burns. Ronan's grip on Elara's arm tightened. He was realizing she had lied to him. She hadn't killed him. "And who is this?" Don Dimitri asked, his eyes sliding to Elara. "I heard you found yourself a little pet, Ronan." "This is my fiancé," Ronan said, his voice challenging. "Elara." Don Dimitri squinted. He tilted his head. He looked at Elara's eyes. The same olive-dark eyes that his wife had possessed. Elara stopped breathing. She prayed to every saint she knew. "Don't recognize me, please." "Elara," Dimitri repeated. "Voss, is it?" "Yes," Elara choked out. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. "Nice to meet you," Dimitri said, extending a hand. He didn't recognize her. It had been years. She had been a chubby teenager with braces and bad hair when she left. Now she was a woman in couture. Elara took his hand. It was cold. She shook it quickly and pulled away. "She's shy." Magnus grunted, stepping in. "Leave her alone, Dimitri. Let's talk business." They moved to a private table. The tension was unbearable. Elara sat next to Ronan, unable to eat, unable to drink. Every time Victor looked at her, she felt like a deer in the crosshairs. Halfway through the dinner, Victor leaned forward. "You know, Elara," he said, swirling his wine. "You look incredibly familiar. Do you have family in Sicily?" "No," Elara said quickly. "Ohio." Victor chuckled. "Strange. You hold your fork like a Sicilian. You listen like a Sicilian." And he paused, his eyes narrowing. "You wear that necklace, the gold cross." Elara's hand flew to her neck. She'd forgotten to take it off. It was a small, antique cross, her mother's cross. Victor's smile vanished. He stared at the cross, then at her face. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. His eyes went wide, then darkened with a rage so pure it terrified her. He stood up abruptly. "Victor?" Don Dimitri asked. "What is it?" "We are leaving," Victor said, his voice shaking. "Sit down," Dimitri commanded. "I said we are leaving." Victor slammed his fist on the table. "This meeting is a farce. Vale is mocking us." "How am I mocking you?" Ronan asked, standing up slowly. Victor pointed a shaking finger at Elara. "You bring her. You parade her in front of us. Do you think we are stupid, or do you just want to start a war right here?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Ronan said, stepping in front of Elara. "Ask her," Victor screamed. "Ask her who she is. Tell him, Elara, tell him who your daddy is." The entire ballroom went silent. Ronan turned to look at Elara. His face was pale. The betrayal was already forming in his eyes. "Elara," he whispered. Elara stood up. Tears streamed down her face. There was no point in running anymore. "I'm sorry, Ronan," she sobbed. "Who are you?" Ronan roared, grabbing her shoulders. "My name," she whispered, "is Elara Russo." The reaction was instantaneous. Magnus Vale roared in fury. "A Russo in my house, under my roof!" Ronan let go of her as if she burned him. He looked at her with a mixture of horror and heartbreak that shattered her soul. "You are the enemy," he said. "Get her!" Don Dimitri shouted, realizing his daughter, his runaway property, was standing there. "Grab her!" The Russo guards lunged forward. The Vale guards drew their guns. "No!" Ronan shouted, but it was too late. Chaos erupted. A gunshot rang out, shattering a chandelier. Guests screamed and dove under tables. In the confusion, Victor lunged across the table. He didn't go for a gun. He went for Elara. He grabbed her by the hair, dragging her backward. "You little traitor," he hissed. "You're coming home to pay for what you did." "Ronan!" Elara screamed, reaching out. Ronan stood there for a split second, frozen by the revelation. She was a Russo. She was the blood of the men who killed his uncle. But then he saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the woman who had cleaned his hand, the woman who had made his father laugh. He made his choice. Ronan vaulted over the table, tackling Victor. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and fists. "Garrick! Get her out!" Ronan screamed. Garrick grabbed Elara's arm. "Go now! I can't leave him!" Elara cried. "Move!" Garrick dragged her toward the kitchen exit. Behind them, the ballroom turned into a war zone. The last thing Elara saw before the kitchen doors swung shut was Ronan standing over her brother, gun drawn, holding back the entire Russo clan to give her a head start. Elara sat in the back of the getaway car, speeding through the rainy streets of Manhattan. She wasn't going to the mansion. Garrick was driving her to a safe house in the Bronx. "He hates me," Elara whispered, staring at the rain on the window. "He saved me, but he hates me." "He doesn't hate you," Garrick grunted, checking the mirrors. "If he hated you, you'd be dead on the floor of the plaza. But you have a lot of explaining to do." They arrived at a nondescript apartment building. Garrick hurried her inside. "Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but Ronan. I have to go back and help the boss." Garrick left. Elara was alone. She sat on the floor of the empty apartment, hugging her knees. Time passed. The lock clicked. Elara scrambled back, grabbing a kitchen knife she had found. The door opened. It was Ronan. He looked wrecked. His suit was torn, his lip was split, and there was blood on his shirt that wasn't his. He walked in, locked the door, and leaned against it, closing his eyes. Ronan. Elara dropped the knife. He opened his eyes. They were cold, hard flint. "Put the knife down, Elara." The use of her real name stung. Is everyone okay?" she asked. "My father is fine. Your father took a bullet to the leg. Victor escaped." Ronan pushed off the door and walked toward her. "We are now at war, a full-scale war because of you." "I didn't want this," Elara cried. "I ran away from them. They are monsters. Victor, he abused me. My father tried to sell me off to a rival family in Chicago to settle a debt. That's why I ran. That's why I hid." "Why didn't you tell me?" Ronan stopped inches from her. "Why did you let me bring you into my home? Let me trust you. Let me—" He stopped, his voice cracking. "I fell in love with a ghost." "I am not a ghost," Elara shouted, poking him in the chest. "I am the woman who took care of your father. I am the woman who knows how you take your coffee. I am the woman who loves you." Ronan froze. "What did you say?" "I love you." Elara sobbed. "And I know who I am. I am a Russo by blood. But I am a Vale by choice. I choose you. I choose Magnus." Ronan stared at her. The anger in his face warred with the desperate need he had for her. "You can't be both," he said hoarsely. "You have to choose tonight." "I already chose," Elara said. "I'm here." Ronan looked at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then the dam broke. He grabbed her face and kissed her, hard, desperate, possessive. "If you stay," he whispered against her lips, "there is no going back. You are dead to them, and if they come for you, I will burn the city down to keep them away." "Let it burn," Elara whispered. Later, the Vale estate was quiet. The war had been bloody but short. With the inside knowledge Elara provided about her father's operations, Ronan had systematically dismantled the Russo Empire. Don Dmitri was in prison. Victor was in hiding in South America. In the garden, under the shade of the olive trees, Ronan had imported to make the place feel more like home. Magnus sat in his chair. "Read to me," he commanded. Elara smiled. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a white sundress, and on her finger was a ring with a diamond the size of a grape. She opened the book, but before she could start, Ronan walked into the garden. He carried 2 espressos. He handed one to his father and one to Elara. "How is the patient?" Ronan asked, kissing the top of Elara's head. "The patient is bored," Magnus grumbled, "but the coffee is good." Ronan sat down on the bench next to Elara. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. "The coffee is perfect," Ronan said, looking at his wife, "just like the barista." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. She looked out at the high walls of the estate. They were still walls. It was still a cage in a way, but the door was open, and the wolf inside wasn't biting anymore. She looked at Ronan and smiled. "The wolf and the she-wolf get married," she whispered in the dialect. Translation: "The wolf and the she-wolf get married." Magnus cackled. Ronan just smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "Welcome home, Elara Vale." And that is how the shy waitress who trembled at the sight of a wine bottle became the queen of the New York underworld. She didn't win by using a gun or a knife. She won by using her voice, her heritage, and the one thing the Mafia never expects, the truth spoken in the language of the ancestors. To speak. Elara Voss, Elara Vale, proved to speak. Elara Voss, Elara Vale, proved that even a ghost can leave a mark that lasts forever. Wow, what a journey. If you got chills when Elara stood up to her brother at the plaza, hit that like button right now. Do you think you would have chosen love over your own family like she did? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more gripping stories about secrets, power, and forbidden romance, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a part. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next